Maybe a little later, Brandon? Okay, so, and then we're also fortunate to have two senators on our panel, Senator Ball, Senator Bright, and our amazing panelists who are here. So I think the main thing is reaffirm what Tasha said. This is not just about kiddos. It is primarily about our kiddos, but it's about the parents as well. It is about our economy. It is about our society. I tend to talk a lot about the dollars, but it is not, that doesn't move us, Pamela, right? Pamela reminds me, we have Pamela here from my friend at Mount High Early Learning, and she was reminding me yesterday, Ethan, it's not just the dollars and the numbers, it's our hearts, right? It's our kids, that's what's gonna move people, so thank you for Pamela, keep me focused on that. And I have a budget, right? So I gotta deal with the budget. So in this enrollment freeze, so we have a couple things. We have the federal threat, which I feel like is a little less of a present threat to cut off all CCAP money, but we have the enrollment freeze. So in the last 9 months, we've lost $300,000 in revenue, right? So that is a lot of money that goes to pay teachers, to pay benefits, to pay heat, to pay all that kind of stuff. It's just the reality of it, right? And I know people get tired of talking about that, but it is something that we have to deal with. But we'll focus on the kids, and that's what we're gonna hear from today is 4 amazing experts. So Senator Scott Bright, Senator Matt Ball, we have Christina Taylor, and we have Ms. Therese Bryant. We're very grateful to have you all. We need to acknowledge that our 2 senators need to leave probably by about 8:30. So we will excuse them when they go out to do their job down at the Capitol and find some solutions to CCAP, which I know they're going to do. It's a matter of time. Right? It's just easy. All right, so we're going to jump into the questions. The first question is for any panelist. We have 1 mic, or no, I guess we have 2 mics. Okay, good. So you guys can just pass around. The first is for everybody. The lack of affordable child care costs Colorado's economy about $2.7 billion annually and pushes parents out of the workforce, as we've been talking about. So this is kind of a rhetorical, easy question. Do you see child care as an economic development issue? And if so, how should policies reflect that? So we'll start with Senator Bright.
Thank you, and thanks so much for having us here. I appreciate every chance we get to talk about early childhood, childcare, the challenges and the opportunities. And so we love to see groups like this come together and see what solutions we can find as a whole. Childcare definitely is a workforce issue. This is what gets families to work, gets them to provide for the family, food on the table, etc. So workforce is our issue here when we talk about childcare. I don't know how to emphasize that better or harder. It is incredibly expensive. If you think about childcare and what goes into it, 75% of the cost of childcare is that workforce, it's labor. And so when we try to address or grapple with the costs of childcare, that's very much where we need to start. And so if universal childcare in Colorado costs in excess of, I don't know, estimates have it over $500 million just for the state of Colorado, 75% of that is a large number. So how do you go about trying to find a solution for childcare addressing workforce as your primary cost issue? We can come together with buildings and grants for facilities and things like that, and that will address the other portion of what it costs to provide childcare, but really it's the cost of workforce where we need to start. So that is our largest challenge. So I don't know, I mean, there are some states, namely New Mexico, who have started to try to address that, and it takes a lot of cubic dollars to make that happen. So that's where the solution might lie, or at least the first part of it we need to address. So I'll pass it on.
Thank you for the question. A tough question. I'm going to say yes. Thanks for having me. It's also great to be here. I've got 3 kids who are 4, 6, and 8, and they went to Warren Village for childcare. Now I get to be Senator Bright's sidekick on a bunch of childcare legislation in the Senate, so it's wonderful to be here. So clearly I think the answer is yes, but I would maybe also add, it's not only a workforce issue in that you look at the numbers and you see all the economic productivity that's lost because people have to leave the workforce. I think it also relates to our health as a region and as a state. So I represent about 1/5 of the city in Denver. I live in Capitol Hill. I talk to a lot of people. Cap Hill is where you get a lot of 20-somethings, 30-somethings who graduate from college. Maybe they're moving to Colorado. They live in Cap Hill for a while. And then a lot of them leave because they cannot afford childcare in Denver. And I have this conversation with my neighbors all the time. I have this conversation with my constituents all the time. And it's a lot of people who want to live in the city, but they just can't. And as someone who's navigated childcare in Denver in the middle of the pandemic, I get it, because there were years and years and years where childcare far exceeded the cost of our mortgage. So it's a huge impact economically, but I also think it has a huge impact on like the vitality of specific communities, because it's not healthy to have communities where you don't have kids. It's not healthy to have a state where there are some places where you can raise kids and there's some places where you can't. It's much more healthy to have places where you have a diversity of neighborhoods. Brighton's very different from Denver, that's wonderful. You should be able to live in any one of those places in Colorado that fits the lifestyle you want, and you should be able to have kids in those places. And all of that has a huge impact on the economy, obviously, but also just the overall health of our state.
Thanks. Christina Taylor. I would say this is an obvious yes, which good tee up. I think the one thing that we didn't touch on yet also is the fact that this keeps an enormous amount of women out of the labor force, and that has a huge impact on our economy. It's been shown time and time again that many women leaving the labor force in their prime is not good for our economy and not good for our communities. I speak from experience in that I have 2 kids. Thankfully they're teenagers now, but when they were young, I stayed home. I did childcare from my home. Tried to get away from childcare in my career and went to public health and somehow came back because this issue was so important. So I think that we continue to see childcare as a failed market. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. It needs to be funded as a public good. Obviously, that's going to be my line here.
I'll piggyback on your line. So let's talk a little bit about this, right? People are not leaving the workforce because they're weak, they can't figure out how to balance their schedules. They're leaving the workforce because the workforce was not designed for parents. It wasn't in a place where parents can automatically be at school, drop their kids off, pick them up. I mean, I remember I have 2 children. One's 20 now, she's interesting. And, and I also, we love her, but we all have that one kid where you're like, oh, she's gonna be something, right? And then I have a 15-year-old, right? And I remember in our workforce, my husband is the one that actually chose to stay home because we were doing the balancing of, can we afford it, can we not? We could afford it, but it was gonna be his whole paycheck to pay for it, because it's not just providing childcare, it's quality childcare. It's not just putting a child somewhere where we can like leave them for a couple hours and come back and pick them up and hope there's no scrapes, bruises, and all of those things on them. It's being able to access childcare that is quality for your child throughout the terms of their life, right? So I think not only is it an economic issue, it's also an issue that we have started to try to put policy forward to help with. A little bit about my background, I was the public-private partnership director at the state of Colorado for a while, and we were looking at turning some of our state assets into places in which childcare could be created and produced. But the affordability factor, the math never mathed right? It was always a question of, can people actually afford to go to where we build? You can't make the assumption that build it, they will come. It's build it, they will come if it's affordable, and they can also make sure that it's quality. And then again, the other piece of the workforce is making sure we're paying our providers and the people who are working in this field a livable wage so that they also can afford to do the things that they need to do. So I think we're starting to see some changes in Colorado. We have 2 great senators up here who are supporting the changes that we need to make in the state, but I think we still have a little bit to go.
Awesome, thank you all, that's great. So let's continue with the theme of the highest cost of childcare, and healthcare, we could cover all of those. So we talk about $20,000 and up, right, for a child to be in care from 6 weeks old to 5. Obviously it varies based on the age, and we know that's a lot of money, but we also know it's not enough money, right, because our folks are not getting paid enough. So I feel like we need to change the script a little bit, and I think we've heard the answers already, but I would like to maybe start with Natrice. I mean, what more can companies do, private companies, right, as well as public leaders, and then maybe bounce to Senator Bright as well on that question, and anybody else that wants to tackle it. But Natrice, could you start with that one?
Sure, and then I'll throw the mic over the rest of the room. So a couple of things that we're starting to see companies doing is creating their own centers if they have the space. The airport has been a really great partner to kind of look at how, you look at how many workers work those odd hours. They're not working 8 to 5. the airport never closes. So you need to have those shifts that are a little bit earlier and a little bit later to be able to accommodate that. So Denver International Airport is looking at, placing additional childcare for their workers within the airport to really create that opportunity. We're also seeing partners like Amazon. They have a huge workforce that's in the state of Colorado. However, their facilities are not zoned appropriately to be able to have childcare in those locations. So they have to partner with other organizations to be able to provide that, but they have money and they're willing to kind of step up to the gate and say, look, we'll help support the cost of build out, we'll help support the cost of deferred maintenance and all the things that come with what it looks like to hold a childcare center, to create spaces, because they know that their employees are not going to continue to be in the workforce if they can't find a place to put their children. We've also seen a couple of other partnerships. We've seen hospitals do the same thing. University Hospital has also looked at providing some childcare on the Anschutz campus. And we're starting to see companies really step up and recognize if they don't put their foot forward, they're going to lose really great employees. And so those are some of the things that we're continuously seeing across the board of companies really recognizing nurses don't have 8 to 5, airport workers don't work 8 to 5. So let me create a space where my employees can come to work, feel comfortable leaving their children, pick them up, not have to drive all the way across town to get them, and still be able to do their day-to-day.
Yeah, so the affordability issue, and how do we create great spaces that fit the majority of employees out there. There's not one silver bullet to solve all of these issues, and I feel like it's something that with the grace of God, Senator Ball and I might have another 6 to 7 years to be able to try to solve this. And we're looking at many different ways to approach this, to tuck this in, to nip that off, to really try to make this space more efficient. Every time you address the need of childcare within an employer setting, you have provided a solution for some, but probably not all. Each child has its own unique needs, and not every child is going to fit in that space. You might have a child with an IEP, you might have a child that has some autistic issues, you might have a child that needs different sorts of care, and not every space fits every child. And as you start to create those spaces for those kids, it creates different ratios. And teacher-to-child ratios drive the cost, 75% of the cost of care. So as soon as you're going from a 1 to 10 ratio with a group of 3-year-olds to a 1 to 1 or 1 to 2 ratio based on scheduling needs or based on learning needs of those kids, the cost just goes exponentially up. So we can do that, and I feel like those are some of the small areas in which we can try to eat this elephant, I guess. But it's going to be a long process of trying to really reset the table and say, what can we do to A, provide basic health and safety for these kids, and solve the problems with solutions for the workforce that needs it. So we're going to work at this one issue at a time. It's not like one bill that's going to solve all of this, but we're going to approach every issue as we can.
I would say another piece about how employers can really engage in this space. I'll use my own experience as an employer of more than 20 employees. Yes, a small employer. But we've created incredible flexibility for our staff. We offer paid leave for the various needs for parents. And the majority of my team have young children. People come to us when they are ready to start their family because they know that they're going to work for an organization that supports them in raising children. And it has proven itself out in spades in productivity and output. I don't know if you all know this, but my organization passed a ballot initiative in November. So and I think that speaks volumes about supporting your staff too, right? Like my team showed up day in, day out, worked their butts off to get these kind of things passed while raising young kids, while bringing those kids to the office, while figuring out the flexibility they needed to be really strong parents. I was reading an article the other day around how there's a lot more companies creating paid paternity leave, but there's still so much stigma around men taking time off to go be with their kids. And that's another huge one, right? Like companies need to create the culture that allows both parents to be active participants in the raising of their children. We need men to be singing this from the rooftops about how important it is, and that starts with some of these culture changes within business, and so that's another piece I would tag.
I would echo everything that's been said. I think Patrice put it really well. Our system just doesn't cater to parents, right, in the workforce. And I've spent almost all my working life in the public sector in some form. My background is primarily military, but then I spent some time at the city before working in the state legislature. The one exception to that is for a couple years I worked at a law firm because I was having kids and they had really generous leave policies, and I wanted to be able to take paternity leave when 2 of my 3 kids were born. So I think this is a huge issue. I also think it's part of like a cultural shift that we need to make towards how we view work and how work caters to just the lives of the employees who make up our workforce. But I think employer-provided childcare is really the direction that we need to go. I think a lot of the conversations around leave have gained momentum, and at least from my experience, companies are getting better at providing leave, having that leave apply equally to parents. But that's all some of the problem, not all the problem. So I think the next step is things like employer-provided childcare, so that you can close that gap of what happens when you come back from leave, but you still need to work.
Okay, this is great. So we're gonna go off script a little bit here, but I'm gonna start and pick on Matt. So I appreciate everything that's been said, but I just don't understand, why can't the state of Colorado fund kids starting at 6 weeks old versus 5? I mean, what's the barrier there?
It costs money to do that, and that is always the barrier. And I think Senator Bright and I might disagree a little bit on the reason why we don't have a lot of money at the state, but I would point mostly towards Tabor. I think there's also a good argument on overspending and the way that Colorado handled its pandemic dollars. I think both of those things there's some truth to. But at the end of the day, we don't have a lot of resources. I've been in the state legislature now a little over a year. This is my 2nd session. This is the 3rd billion-dollar budget hole that I've had since I've been there. We had one last year. We had to come back over the summer in special session and cut another, I think, $750 million. This year now we've got a $1.5 billion budget hole. So it's really hard, because at this point we have looked in all of the couch cushions to find that money and all of the one-time funding. And then you're looking at a pretty slim budget where you're trying to balance, a third of the budget is K through 12, a third of the budget is medical costs, healthcare, and then the rest is things like infrastructure. We need to fund our prisons. It's things that we don't have the option to turn off or turn on as a state. And so that budget environment just makes it really, really hard to find, the resources to provide childcare, or at least provide some subsidy for childcare in the way that I think we need to. So I think part of the answer has to be, I would say 2 things. One is just priorities. I think childcare needs to be a higher priority for everybody in the state, but certainly state legislators. And then the second is additional funding, and whether that is some relief from Tabor at the state level, whether that is local communities, and this has happened, as you know, who pass local ballot initiatives to put more money in childcare. Whatever it is, I think additional revenue has to be part of the conversation, because the problem is pretty simple, it's money, but the solution to that can be hard.
Okay, I've been dying for this one. A couple things in this space. Yes, Tabor exists. It's called a credit limit for us as a state. I would also add that we have found ways to work to develop programs outside of Tabor. Does everyone know that the Universal Preschool Program is funded outside of Tabor? Did you know that more programs, more revenue is generated and spent outside of Tabor than is inside of Tabor? So there are opportunities to create a program to make this work and do it outside of Tabor, outside of our credit limit as a state. My caucus would be mortified to hear me say this, but I feel like the solution lies outside of Tabor. Because that's where we can actually grow this program. That's where we can actually make this difference. Shifting gears to legislation in this session, what Senator Ball and I are trying to do with a couple bills that we're running together is to try to make the space more efficient so that we're using our dollars more efficiently, covering those basic health and safety pieces, and then taking a look at what's optional here, what's extra. We all agree that high quality early childhood education is what gets kids ready for school, and in the end, that is the overall goal that we have when we have kids in our space. We have a CCAP problem, a CCAP challenge. The federal government funds 70% of our CCAP, and that's been flat funded for years. Not a surprise to anyone. While we were temporarily shut off for a little bit, suffering the finger pointing that happens above our pay grade, we did our best to prove that, hey, we have fraud-proof systems in Colorado. So we have done what we needed to do as a state to prove that we have great space here. We're working diligently and effectively in that space. Another bill that you'll see coming up here within the next couple of weeks addresses the CCAP freezes. I'm excited to do that work. It's been a huge work in process, and I wanted to get this bill out in February, and it just hasn't got there. And it's mainly because I'm trying to solve all the problems that are popping up before we actually have bill language. And so we have the final version. It has unanimous support from both the Senate as well as the House. It has great bill sponsors on it. It has gone through the vetting of the Attorney General's office. It's gone through the vetting of the Governor's office. So within a couple weeks here, we'll be able to see some bill language that helps to provide a long-term solution for CCAP. The state, as we know, in its budget crisis, can't afford to put more than the 25% that it currently puts in. The counties are putting in 5-ish% based on the county. So some of these solutions lie locally within the counties and within the municipalities that we're talking about. Some of them lie within the state, even though the state's strapped. We can find enterprises and other ways to try to help with this space. And then we need to champion this at a federal level too, to try to impress upon our federal colleagues that childcare is a priority and that it does deserve to be higher on the list of priorities. So I'm excited to see what the next few weeks has to offer, and if we can get to May 13 with a solution to try to refund this space, I'll be stoked.
I appreciate you mentioning that. We wait with bated breath to support, appropriately as a 501c3, of course, anything that can help us, because it is an existential threat for those 35,000 kids across the state who rely on CCAP to break those cycles of poverty and to help the parents. So we appreciate what you're doing a lot. Can we go to, Christina, can we go back and can you talk a little bit more about the ballot initiative, expand on that, and then relevance for the state when we're looking at solutions that are scalable?
Absolutely, yeah. So most of you are probably aware, but we passed a ballot initiative in November in Larimer County, 0.25% sales tax to fund early care and education. It took 6 years to get us here, 6 years of active work, probably 20 years of messaging in our community to get us where we are. But this has been crucial for us. The gap in Larimer County is probably $60 to $80 million. We'll be bringing in just over 20 million to help plug some of those holes, but certainly not completely fixing the system, and that's kind of how it fits into the larger state context, right? I think it's important for local communities to come up with their own solutions as is feasible, but it also creates disparities across our state, right? People that live in Larimer County are going to get more than our neighbors in Weld County or in Boulder County, and I don't love that, but we have to take care of our own, right? I think the larger solution at the state and federal level, solutions that can happen can blend and braid with local solutions to really cover the full gap, and I think that's really where I'll continue to focus as a leader in this space, because again, there's not enough money. One of the things that I'm struggling with in Larimer County, since we've passed this ballot initiative, it's been 4 months, and I have philanthropy thinking they can pull out. So this really large messaging challenge of, no, this is not a supplanting philanthropy dollars, because then it's going not far enough. It's in addition to, and so we have to keep telling the story. We have to keep being really loud about it. But it cannot just be local communities solving it, because it's never gonna be enough. It was a big deal for us to get this passed. Only 51% of our electorate voted for it. And so we have a huge challenge for reauthorization in the next 20 years to get the rest of those folks on board. I don't know if I answered what you wanted me to answer.
So I think a couple things, as the senators were talking, I think that there's a couple things that we are hearing here. We have created enterprises for things that we prioritize at the state. And I can say that because we created enterprises for transportation, we've created enterprises for housing, we've created enterprises that really are those priority issues that we're seeing at the state level, and there is an ability to do that. If childcare is really a priority in this community, which we know it is, we can create enterprises outside of Tabor that we don't have to worry about Tabor caps hitting and then all of a sudden everybody gets $5 back in their refund. So I think as we're looking at this from a policy perspective, I also sit on the EPIC board as well, and some of the policy initiatives that we're looking at is at the federal side. But you also have the ability, as Christine said, to really go to the local level as well. The problem is, universally, each of the 64 counties may not be able to do some of that. So how can we as individuals in the community really support, help educate on what you can do to get things on the ballot? How do you get things on the ballot? How can you move that forward? Work with our state partners and our state legislature on potentially creating enterprises. I'm not saying we should do that tomorrow, but we're in session, so if there's an opportunity. But we have created enterprises because we have found foundational issues at the state level that we are like, hey, it's gonna have a Tabor issue, so we created something to push that forward. We haven't had a gas tax increase, I'm not saying that's where it comes from, but we haven't had one in decades, right? So there's places the dollars can actually sit, and we could create something that really does support it. Imagine if early childcare was funded the same as K through 12. Just think about that. Okay, I won't get political, sorry.
That's a great concept, I love that. So we just want to conscious of time for our senators. Are you guys good, or do you need to get going? Soon, okay, so then maybe we give you guys a chance to either give us the magic wand question or what gives you hope question for the or both, either way.
Magic wand. If I could wave a magic wand, obviously, we want to have solutions for all of our problems. I mean, that would be the magic wand. The work that we're doing very diligently, very carefully in both the pre-session as well as this last session is trying to reset health and safety rules and set them apart from quality initiatives. They are both important, but they both need to have different approaches. So we need to address health and safety with our licensing group within the Department of Early Childhood, and we need to address quality in initiatives that make sure that those kids are ready for school and that they're in the best, safest, highest quality places with the best, safest, and highest quality interactions with their teachers. So if I were to have a magic wand, it would be to get that work done immediately so that we can then take a step forward with that new foundation of basic health and safety versus quality moving forward in that space. So that is the work that's in front of us. It's super challenging, and so I wish I was already fast forward to the next spot. That would be my magic wand.
This is a good question. I think my magic wand would be that we extend in some way the way we think about K through 12 to be like age 2 through age 18. And I think we've taken some steps towards that with things like UPK. So we're sort of slowly shrinking that gap where we just expect people to figure it out before you get the chance to be part of the public system. But my magic wand would be to totally close that gap to the point that if you have kids in the state of Colorado, you know that not only do you have leave, but after you get done with leave, you have some ability to participate in something public or something that's publicly assisted for your child from the time you get back from leave to the time that child is 18. And that's a promise I wish one day we could make as a state. Right now we make that promise after your kid is 4, maybe 3, depending on where you are, maybe 5 when you get into kindergarten. But I would love to see us, however we could, really close that gap so we can make a promise to families that you can come here and you can have kids, and we will have some way to help you take care of them and work while you do it. And I think that would really make our state thrive.
magic wand. Do it.
Magic wand, gosh. Statewide policy that covers what you just said, right? But not just, I think a lot of what we get caught up on when we have this conversation is we just need to fund tuition, or we just need to fund something, right? And it needs to be a holistic system that funds all of the pieces of early childhood to make it really high quality, so that it's supportive of the educators, it's supportive of the kids, it's supportive of the parents. Right now, the universal preschool system is not super supportive of parents. It's not covering a ton of time for them. They have to balance their kiddos from multiple different places. A true magic wand would be a system that is human-centered and holistic and supportive of all the folks that navigate this, that really values those educators and treats them like the magicians that they are in creating our next generation. So I don't know how we do that. That's for smarter people than me.
For my magic wand, I would hope that we can create a space where parents don't have to choose their kids over their work and don't have to make this the choice. I told you guys my husband was the one who made the choice not to go to work, which was a huge stigma. What do you mean you're a stay-at-home dad? Dad's supposed to be the one that goes to work. That would also be something I'd love that we can change, is the stigma in the community of men being able to stay home and raise their children. Bigger picture, funding is going to continue to be our challenge, because we are always going to have funding gaps because things become more important and those things rise to the top and they take over things that we may feel are important at the time but just don't have enough advocacy behind it to speak loud enough. The other thing that I'd love to see is the ability for us to create a system that pays the people who we are paying to take care of our children a livable wage, and also making sure that we're providing that quality childcare and safe quality childcare for the kids, but also making sure we support the workers in that community to be able to also live. Last big picture magic wand thing that I'd love to see is us to really take a look back. Universal preschool is a great program, right? It's wonderful that we have it. We didn't have it when my kids were little, so we had half-day kindergarten, someone dropped them off, someone picked them up, so usually it was the same person. But kids need education prior to that. So how do we deal with we've got parents putting themselves on wait lists before they even have a baby, because they know that the wait lists are going to be so long. So I'd love to see us actually have childcare that really deals with the population growth that we're starting to see, doesn't make people sit on a wait list for a year prior to even having a child, to make sure that they have a space for their baby, and also making sure that we can just take care of our kids even more and even better than we already do.
Well, these are great answers to the wand. I love it. Okay, we're going to do one more question. Unless you have to literally walk out, you can give us the answer as you're leaving. That is, I'm not going to ask you who you're supporting for the governor, okay? But I will ask you, what's the number one thing that the governor, because we're going to have a new governor, should do in this space?
I feel like I know less about this question than you. Number one thing for the governor, I think the biggest thing that I see, and we've worked on some bills this year. We've got Senate Bill 20, which will create a task force that will get together this summer to look at issues of efficiency, provider burden, trying to right-size our regulatory regime within CDEC. I think our hope with that, my hope for the next governor, would be to come in with sort of CDEC 2.0, right? I think this governor has done a really great job in creating the department, making UPK a thing, taking a big step in this direction. I think what we need now is to take the next step where we have a different vision. And so I would love a governor to come in. I think it's our goal for a governor to come in really just with a new sort of vision for what that department can look like, and a way for that department to improve on where we are now. Because CDEC is a young department, right? So there's always growing pains when you start a new department. So I would just love for there to be just a fresh vision and a fresh focus for childcare at the state level.
Thanks, great comments. I also believe that we can't afford to go backwards. And so as the new governor steps in, I hope and pray that that individual has the vision for early childhood that we all do in this room, and chooses to prioritize it over so many other things that we are tending to fund anymore with the state in the state. So the higher that early childhood gets on his or her priority list, the more likely we're going to have solutions instead of these sorts of challenges. So number one, I just hope we don't slide backwards. And number two, I hope that we have the right team in place, the right support in place to say, dear Governor, you have the legislators here ready to do the work. Let's just set the vision and make that a high priority. We'll do the work, we'll get it done. Just give us some support.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. If you want to walk out, I won't take it personally. I'll just. I would just second what both of our senators just said. I think we can't afford to go backward, and I agree that we need to have some fresh eyes on the system that has been built over the last several years. I would tag on to that our next governor needs to really prioritize community voices in furthering the early childhood system. We can't keep doing top-down work because those of us in our local communities doing the work know better. We've been doing it for decades and understand what our communities need, how the system works, how it needs to be designed. And so any elected leader in this state really needs to focus on the constituents down on the ground that are doing the work and help co-design as we move forward.
And also, I think that there needs to be additional support for our local governments. I think we've got, well, I know we have 64 counties. We have a lot of municipalities, and they need the support to be able to create programs and create things that support their communities. So it's the constituents, but it's also looking at the local governments and figuring out what does X county actually need and how from a state level can we support that county in being well equipped to provide childcare. A Eastern Plains community is very different than the metro area, and we cannot have a one-size-fits-all solution. So I think the governor needs to look at what opportunities do we have to support rural communities. We have a very huge rural and urban divide in so many different aspects across our state, and so we need to start looking at how we can support those communities as well. I also would love to see him or her really look at how you can continue to support CDEC and make it an even better organization. It's rare that we get a new department at the state level, very rare, like super, super rare, you guys. So in order to be able to support that department and its successes, we need to actually provide the funding for that department to support what is necessary to make it work. And then finally, new governor, I would love to see an opportunity to create grant programs or something of that nature to support providers and really have dollars that are available for updates to be made, changes to be made. Every institution is not the same, so we can't treat it as such. So I'd love to see those things happen.
Thank you. Awesome. Do we have time, Brandon, for a couple questions, or what? I don't know where our timeline is. Yeah. Okay, so we got a lot of smart people in this room. Elsa, question from Elsa.
I'm sorry that the senators are gone, because I wanted to ask them that question, but I will, as the summer comes. Can we also think about redefining how we are using UPK from an equity perspective? I am so tired of hearing the conversation about how we have to be more effective and efficient at the local level, and we're not talking about how to make that money more effective and efficient. And we already know that the definition of universal can be expanded to say a targeted universal model where the kids that need the most support get the most funding. We are wasting some money when we are funding families that actually don't need the funding. So I think we need to come with very bold ideas when we talk to a new governor to say, we already passed that ballot initiative. We don't have to convince anybody that this is a universal program. Now we have the opportunity to redefine how we do the universal work. So this idea that we cannot talk about equity is not benefiting us at the most. We may have sufficient money to do a lot more if we do it at a smarter way and in a way that really benefits, because we know that high quality helps everybody, but it helps the families that need that financial support the most. So I hope we look for really, really bold ideas and not just a little fix, because there is some opportunity to do big fixes.
Can I comment on that?
Please, yeah.
So a couple of things said, and thank you for your comment, I think the term equity gets used and people interpret it the way in which they want to. So equity meaning what? And I always ask people that question, so what do you mean by equity? Is it gonna be distributed by socioeconomic status, because that's not equitable? Is it gonna be distributed by community or people, or how many people live in a certain area? That's also not equitable, because we have more people populated in denser communities that have more access to funds because of where they live, right? And if you live in Holyoke, Colorado, you're not going to have the same access that you would if you live in Denver. So one thing I would say, as a non-state employee anymore, because I don't work for the state anymore, but I worked there for 12 years, these conversations, we have actually, even at EPIC and at another board that I sit on, we've been having the conversations with every candidate, regardless of political party, and asking those questions and saying, look, what would you do differently? And I encourage this group, as you guys move forward, and the team and everybody, to really start having conversations. We know who a couple of our primary candidates could be, right? So start talking with them now and saying, you know, from an equity perspective, or from just looking at the program as a whole, what changes would you make, and challenge them to make those changes? And I know everybody has great talking points, right? But when you ask those types of questions, you can't look at that talking point and make that decision. It has to come from the individual. And we have a couple of candidates that worked in education that were on a board, right? So what would they do differently? And I would just challenge us to continue to ask those questions, because everybody uses the term equity very loosely, and it always seems to come across very differently for different communities.
Other questions from the audience?
Sorry.
No, you go, and then Debbie will go.
Okay, sorry. Well, just on that note, Latrice, thank you. Sorry. On that note, Latrice, as a candidate for the State House, I'm running for Colorado House District 3, what are some of the things that we should all be looking at? What are some of the things that we should be learning more about? How do we approach equity in a non-talking point way, but in a real way? What would you recommend for folks that are looking to do better on that?
Yeah, I have some ideas. So I think that there's definitely a look at our grant programs, right? So how are we looking at the criteria that are being considered as we're looking at grant programs? Do they check these 7 boxes and then we issue that grant to them to support whatever program it is? I would love to see, looking at having some of those dollars really designated for specific communities in the rural part of Colorado. When I was the P3 director, we would get unsolicited proposals from rural Colorado saying, like, we just need to have a building and we're missing the utilities. Can you help us put water in the ground so that we can actually build our facility? We have philanthropic dollars, but they could never qualify for the infrastructure funds that were available because they were a nonprofit organization or they weren't a government entity. So I would say looking at flexibility on eligibility for some of these grants, I think that that would be something that could really support places outside of the metro area. Also, when you're looking at eligibility, make it more flexible. There's the conversation about who can apply for these grants. We had conversations when I was working at the state of looking at, state dollars are not eligible for certain communities, right? But is there flexibility there? Is there something written in law that says you person can never apply for this grant? It's all at the rulemaking level. And so having those conversations at the rulemaking level versus waiting until it's in law and policy and then saying, oh, well, we can't do anything about it. I would love to see more engagement on the rulemaking side as well with community and having those conversations with providers, with people who are actually working in the industry to say, what is it that you want to see from our grant programs? I do feel like we created great grant programs in CDAC, but we have other flexibility to be able to do something different. So that's something else I'd love to see. And maybe I should just pass on because I can go on for a while. Okay. The other thing I would like to see is potentially providing some dollars for providing funds to people who work in the industry, who are present, who are doing the work. We were doing a partnership and looking at University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, who had land adjacent to their current childcare facility, and they wanted to expand that. And they weren't able to apply for any dollars as a university, but they were able to come after public-private partnership dollars to really support the infrastructure development for those sites. So I'd love to also see a conversation with the state to say, say, look, we're creating a program. The Public-Private Partnership Office already has the flexibility for continuous spending authority, and they can utilize current state land to help with the development of early childcare. I would just love to see more funding put in to support that program.
Debbie, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you so much for being, oh, sorry. Thanks so much for being here. So my question, and you actually touched on this a little bit, is around the infrastructure side of it. So not just in rural, especially in the Eastern Plains. And you know, when we talk about food deserts, but there's also the childcare deserts. So you may have the funding for the families, but they may still have to drive 60 miles to get to a childcare facility, and of course, then on top of that, there's a waiting list. So how else would you, or what are some of the other opportunities in terms of the infrastructure, in addition to what you've already spoke about with some employers, the larger employers, but for some of these local communities, they may not, the larger employers may have a child care center, but it's really focused just on their employees. What are some opportunities there?
Yeah, so the state had created a program through the Department of Treasury last session that allowed for infrastructure funds. We still have to figure out where that money's coming from, right? But the idea was to create this bank of funds to be able to have infrastructure dollars pulled from it, to have eligible entities that are outside of your typical local governments to be able to pull for those funds to help with the infrastructure funding. It costs money to build, and with tariffs and all the other things that continue to increase, deferred maintenance also continues to increase as well. So my thing would be have a conversation with the Treasury Department. We'll have a new treasurer, see how they're going to implement that program. I think some of the dollars were designated for housing, some of them was designated for like just creating infrastructure like roads and things of that nature. Talk with them on that. The other piece that I would say, as we're looking at infrastructure funding, there are different programs at the federal side, and on the EPIC board, we're trying to figure out from a policy standpoint, how do we create programs similar to what we're seeing in like New Mexico or here to allow for those dollars to be accessed by different types of individuals. Again, the eligibility piece is something that I really think we should focus on. We say that it's only eligible for a narrow group of folks, but if they don't have the money to build the thing or put the power into the ground or work with Excel or work with the provider that does the power out in that area to get on the grid, I mean, we're seeing sometimes we're waiting new infrastructure for power by itself. If you're not currently on the grid in the metro area, we're seeing Excel saying that sometimes it could be until 2029 before new things can be built, right? Because we just don't have the power and resources. So I also think some creativity from a sustainability standpoint. Is there another way that you could power your facility besides electricity? It's hard, right? But there's solar options and things of that nature, especially if you own the adjacent land. So I think that those are options that you have. I'll get the bill number for you so you can look it up and see how Treasury is going to implement that infrastructure funding. But that would be one way that I would suggest that to kind of take a look at it.
Anything to add, Christina?
I think the infrastructure needs to be built into local policy as well. The funding that we pass locally in Larimer County does have 10%, not a ton, but enough to bank some funding to fund infrastructure in our more rural communities that need that care. So it needs to be considered whenever we're passing local or statewide policy also.
Awesome, thank you. Could we get a round of applause for our panelists? All right, we appreciate everybody coming out, and I hope you feel what I feel. Those are complex, big, significant, impactful issues. But if I have reason for hope, it is because of this crowd. It is because of the panelists who have brilliant ideas. Patrice is going to run for something we know at some point. We're voting for her. But thank you all for coming. I believe we're going to do some tours of the facility here, our two buildings. If you want to do a tour, hang out for a while. If not, grab a little Duffy roll and some more coffee. And please know how much it means that you came out to support us. So thank you all.